Good day, fellow investors. We discussed our value investing YouTube public quadrant, and there were so many comments and questions. What happened to Nutrien? No idea why Nutrien fell off the list. I'm just shuffling stocks on the quadrant, but as you asked, let's go to my research platform, and I've just updated an analysis on Nutrien. I own it in my diversified portfolio, so let's discuss it. And I also want to show you how I go about researching stocks and how you get to an investment conclusion and valuation. I hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, on my research platform, you have many more similar research reports that you can watch, cover, read about, from food, from commodities, from emerging markets, from hedges, things like that. So feel free to check this out in the link in the description below. So I just updated Nutrien, and let's put this bigger and let's go through the report, and then you can understand the company better. So just updated this. The company was created as the Potash Corporation of Saskatchewan, merged with retailer Agrium. As you can see, over the last 7 years, the stock didn't do much, but this is a cyclical, and that is very important to understand. The current market capitalization is $28 billion. It's fertilizers. There is a good dividend yield. Thus, nothing wrong with the company. Here is the current dividend payments, growing dividend yield. Therefore, it can be interesting for dividend growing portfolios. Nutrien is also active on buybacks, but the activity there depends on the extra cash company makes. Now fertilizers have been down a little bit, so they have cut also the buybacks. If you look at the business, they have potash production, number 3 nitrogen producer in the world, and number 1 agricultural retailer, also the largest global potash producers. They are focused on the Americas and Australia, and of course selling fertilizer globally. Their competitive advantages are very cheap potash production, good supply chains, and largest agricultural retail network. So when it comes to potash, you can see here that the global demand is expected to grow as emerging markets develop, as they spend more on food, as there is more people on the globe, and therefore that's a positive secular tailwind, which is always good to invest in, because even if you make a mistake, the positive secular tailwind will protect you. Can be said it is a margin of safety. And here you see the long-term drivers of the business: more humans, less arable land per head, more spending in high-quality foods that demand higher fertilizers, and I hope the world doesn't get obese as it's happening in developed countries. And you can see here that Nutrien's cost of goods sold are $112 per ton compared to the average net selling price after taxes and everything of $200. That's a good, healthy, still also in this environment, 50% margin, and therefore there is this low cost advantage for Nutrien if you put it on the cumulative cost curve for Nutrien. It means it makes money in whatever environment. However, if we look at potash prices, those have been behaving in cycles. The 2015-20 were bad years, less money, then it boomed as food prices boomed again, and now we have stabilized, but at a higher level than previously. We'll see where this goes forward. However, the cost curve for the customer is flatter, but is still not flat, which means that changes in supply-demand can severely impact prices for potash. And yes, potash prices, investments need to be done going forward, but if you look here, you can see that there is likely possible oversupply, especially as Janssen is coming on another project. If there is oversupply with a little bit less demand, there can be a very ugly year for Nutrien, and that is the cyclicality that we have to understand. Because if you just add 5 million tons here, that Janssen will add, or 9 million tons, the prices, the marginal price that sets the price for the whole market is not 260, is already 180, let's say 200, which changes significantly the situation there with the markets. And you can see here the Janssen potash project that will add 8 million tons of capacity. That's 10% of the current production at low cost. K plus S is still using free European money to try to invest in Canada, but it's a money pit. Nevertheless, they still expect to add another 2 million tons. So that is something discussed also. Nutrien will add a ton and something, million ton and something. So that's also something. Rising demand, but over long term, and here is 2032 discussed. And I want to invest so that I make money now and I don't lose much. So I am looking at the next 2 years, which might create a risk there in the cycle, especially as BHP's Janssen comes on. Nutrien estimates long-term prices at around 400, which is far away from my 200. And I agree on the 400, but I think that bottoms are at 200, and that's where you buy these cyclicals. We are still at mid-price cycle estimate 400. I agree with that, but I want to buy at 200 for a margin of safety, taking advantage of those long-term trends. And you can see here we were touching 300, but we rebounded at a good spring in the US and globally for food. And you can see here the sensitivity on how much money does Nutrien make from potash. If prices go to 200, average net selling prices, so if the price you see is 300, they sell at 200. So that is the impact of the unlikely taxes, shipping costs and things like that. So we are now at 300, which means 200 something for Nutrien. That's the average cycle, let's say a conservative way. They make 1.5 billion in EBITDA. Similarly, nitrogen, less competitive advantage because you don't mine it, so the competition there is fiercer, lower margins, but still sensitivity, and still I estimate 1.5 billion in EBITDA there. And you can see here how those prices go up and down. There is retail, the more stable segment there with Nutrien, and you can see here also some phosphate, but to cut the short story, they are getting about 1.5 billion in EBITDA for potash, 1.5 for nitrogen, 1.7 for retail, 0.3 for potassium, total 5 billion. Capex deducted of 2 billion leaves me at 3 billion. There is approximately 800 million of interest costs. We are down to 2.2 billion, taxes, and 1.5 billion free cash flow situation without major surprises. In 2024, they paid 1.6 billion in dividends, some buybacks, and that is exactly the free cash flow. If fertilizer prices stay higher as they have been doing this spring, they might have a little bit more of free cash flow. But I think that 1.5 could be a nice average to use when it comes to valuation. In good times, free cash flows will go higher. In bad times, free cash flows will be lower. Made the valuation here on the dividend basis. For a normal 10% long-term return, I think the intrinsic value is 43. So that is likely the average cycle. If you want to buy it cheaper, you want closer to 40. It can always happen, and you can see here how improved fertilizer prices also push the stock price. And I think we bought somewhere here at 46 for the diversified portfolio. So on the portfolio fits personally, Svenkerlin maybe at a 20% average cycle yield, which means the market capitalization needs to be below 20 billion, 15 billion, which would make it interesting. Model portfolio, I need a 12% free cash flow yield to start looking at that, so not yet there. Diversified, I bought it when it was a 10% likely return in October. Now it's a little bit less, but I'll still keep it dividends, and I replace it only when I find something better. I still have to add a few stocks there, so we'll see at that. I bought at 46. Here is the transaction. Send an email always when I make a transaction. My plan is to hold and watch the cycle. I always look at the conference calls, what's going on, and you can see here how they might be making good money this year, so the stock might go even higher. So this was an example from my research platform. I always research up to a decision-making point where I know enough what to do with the situation based on the key factors that are there involved. And to make everyone happy, I have returned Nutrien to the Quadrant. When the stock price was higher, it was here. Now I have lowered a little bit, 7% likely return going forward. This is a low risk, maybe I should put it a little bit higher, but I'm watching the cycle and therefore I have put it just here on the risk, and we will follow it over time, and I hope you enjoy that too. Thanks for watching. Check my research platform in the link in the description below, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.